This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company, coming at you Thursday afternoon. It's November 16th after the Wolves' 7-game winning streak was snapped in Phoenix on Wednesday night. A game that we'll get into, but a game that they looked quite exhausted in. Obviously, it was the back end of a road back-to-back in the midst of a 5-game road trip. So a lot of excuses there. Again, we'll get into it. I've got Britt Robinson from MinPost here. We haven't talked to Britt since actually before the road trip started, before the San Antonio game, which was the first of the 5 games they played. Ooh, I just knocked my microphone over. Britt, you wrote in your column this morning that will be out at MinPost on Friday morning that the best excuse for a team to look exhausted in a game is a 7-game winning is coming off of a 7-game winning streak, meaning
right.
You've obviously put a lot more weight into what they did at the beginning of this road trip, or even before that. I assume that's because you're rather blown away by the consistency and kind of, I guess, overall effectiveness of the 7-game road trip.
Yeah.
7-game winning streak. Yeah.
I think that, first of all, 6-4 was as good as they could do in any 10-game increment that, you break it into 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever. And they were 8-2 to start the season. Yeah. And 7 games in a row is, I think that's over 20 years since that happened. So, I mean, this is kind of, it is rather remarkable. And also the caliber of the competition that, they had a couple of, obviously the New Orleans game, that team was strip mined and really not ready to play that game. Golden State wanted to compete in both of the games they played, and they were both emotionally taxing games. That's a proud franchise, even though it's clearly on the fade. Mm-hmm. And, beating Denver and Boston, even at home, when they're riding high and remain probably the odds-on favorites to meet in the finals, I think is pretty extraordinary. I think that I'm of the belief, and always have been, that defense is a much better barometer of elite consistency than offense. Mm-hmm. It's a make or miss league, but it is easier to make people miss than it is to make them all the time. Right. And so, I think that the defense obviously fell down last night. Phenomenal 146-2 is what Phoenix wound up with, and it probably could have been higher. But what I saw was a team that had left it all out on the floor in the previous week and a half. And so I don't think I'm being charitable here when I cut them that slack. I think that they would normally have lost the San Antonio game and the second Golden State game in previous seasons, I believe. It had all the hallmarks of a Wolves collapse, the giving up of offensive rebounds, especially long caroms, transition defense, points off turnovers in general. And I think that, lousy 3-point shooting for the most part. This team has people that are not firing on all cylinders all the time, but are playing together at all times. I mean, even playing together in a loss. I mean, that was a joint collapse against Phoenix. I mean, with the exception of Cat, there really wasn't anybody.
Conley a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think Conley just has a higher level of regulation than other people. Mm-hmm. I mean, his ceilings are not going to be as high as they were in his prime. Mm-hmm. But I think his floors are going to be a lot less frequent. Mm-hmm. And so, I think he's going to be an above average player 90% of the time. Right. That's just the way I feel about him. And so I think that the yo-yos are obviously going to be Gobert and to some extent Cat, but certainly Ant. Yeah. And those are the 3 guys that when they're on, boy, they can make a huge difference. And when they're off, if you're still winning games, that's a really good sign. And Cat was off at the beginning. Ant was off for most of this road trip, and Gobert was off and on, obviously. I don't know. I just, it's really hard not to have growing confidence in this team, given what we've seen. Now, does that mean that, you can pencil in the Wolves for home court advantage? I don't think so. But I think you can say that what they have established thus far is firm.
Yeah.
Injuries could waylay it. Some kind of weird dissension could waylay it, or, whatever.
What kind of things that you would put the same odds of happening to another team? I mean,
Exactly.
I guess there's, when part of that is maybe like shedding the Wolves skin. What did you call it? That Wolves fans can feel losing, like an arthritic person can sense rain coming. Yeah, so there's some of that, but I guess that's why my opinion is kind of shifting or evolving with this team. Is like, yeah, are there potential pratfalls for this team? For sure, but is the likelihood of those pratfalls significantly more likely for them than it is for your other top 12 team in the league? I don't know. Not really. I think we're letting go of some of the idea of immaturity, lack of focus, those sort of things, given how focused they did look through the first 10 games. I guess I just, off of last night in Phoenix, every single possible legitimate excuse, that's about as bad of a quote unquote schedule loss as you can get. And traveling time zones, all those different things. I understand it. But you also come into that game and you go, well, I'm not expecting them to win, but if they did, that would have signaled something like really, really special to me, because I went into that game thinking and remembering Ant's history in back-to-backs, right? He has not been, I mean, everyone's numbers take a little bit of a hit. I was just looking it up this morning. 46% from two in back-to-backs in his career, and in all other games, 52% from two. That's a pretty big difference and a pretty big sample size,
especially given his mid-range fixation.
Exactly. Well, that's a bit new. That wasn't as much there in past years, but yeah, that's probably part of it, right? Is maybe it's a little bit more, whether it's mid-range or not, a little bit more settling, right? And that's kind of what that performance looked like. His 3-point percentage takes a dip in back-to-backs too. Again, all reasonable, but it was that you go into that game expecting a loss, expecting Ant to take a step back, understanding Rudy, I think in particular, given how just electrocuting that second Warriors game was for him.
Right.
You just saw, I wrote in my notes right away in the first quarter against the Suns, I was like, this is the slowest Rudy's looked all season. Not just noting it, not like criticizing it. But I guess they could have totally like stomped out and dispelled all of the immaturity notions and all this, and showed us they're the complete opposite side of that by going into Phoenix and winning last night. But is that a reasonable expectation? No, I think that's where.
Well, not only that, but there are two sides to every coin on games, and a really good performance by the Wolves probably wasn't going to beat Phoenix last night anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, Devin Booker looked like he hadn't missed a beat. Durant seemed comfortable getting everybody else involved with some kind of inner confidence that he was going to have a great game. And then
I think he was like, Jaden's guarding me.
That's right.
So, like, I mean, not that I'm not going to take any shots, but I thought that was an interesting matchup right away. How often do we see Jaden not matched up at the point of attack? Rarely.
Good point.
And they decided to put Ant on Booker and Jaden on Durant
with
off
predictable
the ball.
Results. I mean, I just think that Booker. My bias is that Booker is better than Durant. I know that's a minority opinion even now, but
they're both great.
They're both really, really good. Anyway, the point being is they both were on last night. They're superstars. They both were on. Josh Okogie hit more threes. he doubled his season total of threes in 3 attempts, and so and then
Drew Eubanks hit that corner.
Eubanks did, and I mean, it's and there was, even though Beal was a last-minute scratch, there was a collective idea in that team that tonight's going to be the night that we come out of our cocoon and show the NBA what we have here.
And I think there's an awareness that is new, but that like the Wolves are one of the best teams in the league.
Right.
And let's get back on track against them.
Right.
I think Phoenix came into that game knowing like if we do half-ass this, like the Wolves can beat us. They're a good team now. And it's, some of that cliche, like target on your back sort. I mean,
sure.
Not full on, but certainly more than we're used to watching with the Wolves. I think Booker and KD both came into this game like, okay, like the Wolves have been good, but we believe we're better than them for this season. Like we're going to come out.
Right.
They don't normally have that mentality against Minnesota.
I think it is important to note that Golden State, before those 2 Wolves games, was still being regarded as a fearsome team. And they got exposed a little bit by the talent and style of the Wolves.
Total first game for sure.
Yeah. And second game, I mean,
eventually,
say what you will. Well, I mean, I actually think that it is something that coaches almost always say, and I don't think it's just to cover their ass. I do think when you have a chaotic game where suddenly the game plan might as well get thrown out the window because nobody really knows who these guys are or how they're going to interact, and they have nothing to lose. In fact, they have everything to gain for minutes and everything else. That they're going to play with a swagger, especially when you have a crowd that is suddenly out for blood because 2 are the only 2 guys remaining in there.
It was loud in there, man. It was loud.
And so that's a lot to overcome. And the way they overcame it, I think, deserves the detail I gave it in my story. I'm not a great one for wanting to resurrect every play that happened, days before people read this. But I think little things like Slow-Mo's offensive rebound, Conley's immediate dish to Cat, Ant's dish to Conley. I mean, all that stuff.
Rudy's block in the corner on Saric.
Rudy block in the corner, which how often did Rudy block a corner 3 last year? Maybe a handful at most. I doubt it,
Yeah.
And I've already can count 4 in my own head that he's done this year.
Right.
So it's just,
I mean, that's what was so cool about the end of that Golden State game was you just listed off those 3 plays. They involved all 5 players on the floor at one point. Kyle's offensive rebound, Mike hitting the corner 3, Ant's dish, Rudy with the block, Cat hitting the 3. Like there was a nice poetry to coming from all 5 of them.
And even before that, I tweeted out when Finch saved Ant for the last 6 minutes. He put him in a little later than he usually does. And Cat had it going. And I was thinking to myself, all right, let's see what happens. Yeah. We got Cat going and Ant coming back in the game, having proclaimed himself the team's closer on numerous occasions. And there was not a speck of possessiveness between them. Yeah. They were hitting each other with the ball at the times they should have been. And that sharing of the ball between those 2, they both have interesting egos that they want to pretend that they don't have those egos. But of course, they're not as good as they are without those egos. And they're manifested in very different ways. And yet everybody was on the right page. And if they weren't, I'm not sure that win happens. I think there were a lot of reasons why that game was won by the Wolves. And it did remind me, having seen gritty underdog surges that suddenly get squelched in the final couple of minutes from Wolves is like it's a yearly occurrence.
Right.
To see it happen where the Wolves are doing the squelching, that's a sign of quality. That's, when you dig deep and come up with resourceful, collective ways to eke out a win, that's a character building experience. And Ant and Cat have a right to be proud of the way they conducted themselves with respect to each other in that game. And that, I think, even more than Ant and Rudy, quite frankly, is the relationship, just because of the
Power.
the volatility of scoring. I mean,
Sure.
If you can trust people, and then of course Conley again is the regulator, and it's just the internal makeup of this roster. Going in, we thought there would be phenomenal depth. Well, that hasn't turned out to be as deep as we thought. But among the core 8, there is a synergy there. There is a compassion for a common purpose there.
There's a pecking order.
Yeah. But it's a pecking order that
organically came together.
Has enough variation too.
Yeah.
There's a defensive pecking order. There is a defensive pecking order. There is a rebounding. I found it really interesting to notice that on this road trip, Rudy's blocking shots and getting offensive rebounds, and Cat is corralling defensive rebounds. That's a wild thing, man. I mean, that's another sign of, now, granted, if Cat and Rudy are going for a defensive rebound, Rudy is the bigger man on that usually and lets Cat have that board. But I still think at the same time that Cat is making sure that if Rudy's out blocking shots or crashing on the offensive glass, that he's doing other things. He's trying not to be repetitious with Rudy nearly as much as he was last year. And that's a great sign.
Yeah, you had that stat in your piece. On the road trip, Gobert has 18 offensive rebounds. Cat has 5 offensive rebounds. But also in that same time, Cat has 39 defensive rebounds and Gobert has 23 defensive rebounds.
And blocks, I think, are like 10-1.
Right. Obviously, Rudy being the 10.
Yeah.
I think Cat deserves his own segment here with his play of late. So let's get into him first. Want to let you all know about Falling Knife Brewing Company. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife. Falling Knife, the Wolves play the Pelicans on Saturday evening. That's the next game coming up here. Obviously, that's an option for you to go watch it with other Wolves fans. Also throughout Thanksgiving week, maybe a family or whatever in town. Monday against the Knicks. Wednesday is against the Sixers. I think Friday's against the Kings. If you're looking for a place to go out with your family, but you also want to watch the Wolves game, have the sound on. Falling Knife in Minneapolis will have other people doing that same thing with you. So as always, keep Falling Knife on your radar for a place to go watch the games. I was just thinking this upcoming week in particular might be perfect for that. So that's Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis. All right, Brett. Cat's play of late. I think this is the best 3 games in a row he's played in the Rudy Gobert era.
And maybe ever. If you count defense, yeah.
Wow. Okay. I didn't get there, but like it's maybe it is true. I just didn't think about it.
Let's think about the high wall era. Cat was good, and he fit in well, but it was also tailored to hide Cat some, and I think this current defense is kind of tailored to hide Cat, but less so now that Rudy's in rotation. I think that what is really good, Cat's adjustment to Rudy being in rotation, first of all, it makes sense because it gives him some comfort in the paint, which he likes. I don't know. I just like the way he's his recognition is going up. His reaction time as a result, he's got pre-recognition now, which is so important. You know, he's got some of that as reps, but some of that is, I think, Cat didn't really get the emotional investment in what he was doing last year. Even when he was playing, I just didn't get the impression that he was saying, okay, I'm a power forward now.
But might not have known what that meant. Yeah. Or like
I don't think he
practice,
did. I don't think he really wanted to define himself that way. When I asked him at his signing press conference,
I remember that.
Are you starting to lose weight, you know, to be a power forward? He goes, oh no, I'm a center too, you know.
Yeah.
And that was the first sign that, you know, because
but he's relented on that now. I think for sure. I think there is a
and
great...
that's important, and that's selfless, you know. All this, what my line always was when Finch said he sacrificed more than anybody, I say, okay, good. Let me see the sacrifice, you know. I mean, if he has in fact sacrificed.
But you're saying now that you have and are seeing.
I am seeing the sacrifice. I am seeing the maturity. He's not, he wasn't baiting on the refs as much. He had a little turnover problem against San Antonio, but I really think that his turnovers, I noticed that, you know, I went back and looked at his 10 turnovers on the road trip. 3 of them are lobs to Gobert, where at least one of them, and maybe 2 of them, was classic Gobert not seeing it, you know, which is always an issue. Speaking of which, last night, Jesus, Gobert couldn't locate the ball almost like for most of the night. It was weird.
He was just gassed.
He was fried. Yeah.
And I mean, I guess how could you not be?
And Cat wasn't.
Yeah. because you know what, Cat didn't. Rudy got emotionally fried in San Francisco. Cat did not. And then I've been saying that all week, is like
Pat Bev notwithstanding.
Yeah, well, I mean,
good old Pat Bev.
Right.
Hey, remember me?
Yeah, I
like the little kid trying to get over the fence again. No, buddy, you're behind the fence now.
Yeah. No, when I was talking to Jace about the headlock thing yesterday, I said I was surprised, or like my initial reaction, like watching it happen, was that like Cat or Ant didn't like get in there and try and rip Draymond off. I'm not saying that was the right thing. That people are like, what the hell are you talking about, Dane? You talking all the time about Cat needed to be emotionally regulated. I'm like, no, I know it was a good thing he did it. I'm surprised he did it, you know, or like,
right.
You know, or that's, I don't know. That's where my gut goes in that moment where I'm like, dude, this guy is about to put Rudy to sleep. Like,
it was a weird combination though of a skirmish and a brawl. You know, I mean, the temperature.
Everyone thought it was going to end. Kept thinking it was going to end.
The temperature of the thing just slowly escalated the longer Draymond kept dragging Rudy with his arm outstretched.
It was like Draymond starts dragging Rudy away, and so everyone forgets about Clay and Jaden, the two who are actually trying to punch each other. Like that, Clay is just like free release, and all that's standing between Clay, like none of his teammates are there. All that's standing between Clay and Jaden is Mike Conley just desperately trying to like pull. You could see like Mike's muscles engaged, just trying to yank him away. I mean, it was so chaotic that you forgot the first and primary skirmish because Draymond was just going crazy.
And Rudy did make a mistake. I got a lot of pushback on Twitter about this, but wrapping your arms around an opponent in the middle of a squabble is never a good thing.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and so I thought the outcome was perfect. I would have preferred no fine and a tech, not an ejection, but a tech for Rudy for what he did. It turns out it was a fine and play on for him. Either way, the fact that he didn't come out clean, I think, was to some extent, because let's face it, if Rudy hadn't touched Clay, you know, Draymond would have been even more deranged. I mean, what Draymond did would have been like 20 games, not 10 or 5.
I had this weird, this is stupid, but I had this weird thought in the moment, just because it happened so early in the game. I was like, you know, it would be a cool rule if there was like in the first half, if you get a double tech, you just get timeout till halftime. Wouldn't it have been cool if they all came back in for the second half? That would have been
Well,
wild.
here's the thing that I think people on Twitter made good points about. How in the world does Ant get a tech for yelling one thing after he slams things? And Draymond basically is trying to pick a fight with this guy for like a minute and a half, and nothing happens to him.
I know. It is. Yeah.
What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? I mean, versus somebody going, yeah, after a dunk.
Right. Yeah. Oh, you're saying from the first game, Draymond and
yeah. I mean, the whole idea that
hey, I'm fine. Let the Draymond and Ant one go, and let the Ant dunk go. Like with both of
exactly.
It, you know?
I'm fine with that. But if you're going to try to
you're call
pick up, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Consistently saying that to somebody, those are fighting words. What are you going to do about it? Is like a fighting words.
There's no more obvious truth in any of this other than the fact that the referees are afraid of Draymond Green. That is just a truth. Like, I mean, it is, and whatever. Like that is just it is that way. It's gonna be that way. He's gonna complain about a bunch of calls, and they're just gonna be like, "Well, he'll really lose his head eventually. We'll find him down the line, you know." But this is not worth it to team. I don't know. It's bizarre,
weird. It's a double standard.
Yeah.
Pat Bev, to be fair, opened a little envelope for himself with the refs too. I mean, he would do stuff when he was with the Wolves that I was kind of surprised he didn't get to eat.
Right. When you do it consistently, you get away with it.
And also, Pat Bev used to like. It was fun for me to watch him before games go and chat up refs.
Yeah.
I mean, he was friends with the refs, you know. I don't know about Draymond, whether he does that or not. I think Draymond's got his own kind of code. That
right. No, Pat did do that.
Yeah.
Watching Pat before a game was the best thing in the world.
Well, I mean,
thing. Remember when he slapped Glenn on the butt hard right in front of us? That was...
Yeah, Glenn's 81-year-old ass. I mean, I'm surprised that, you know, there wasn't a broken bone or two. Either in Pat's hand or Glenn's ass. I don't know which.
Speaking of stray voltage, the Carl has... I'm just really impressed, and like not just from the emotional regulation, like
no,
the bag looks deep, right? Like the shot looks good. I mean, I clipped one play from it was like they're down by like 25 last night, but it was like the middle of the third quarter. Like not like Phoenix wasn't trying that little like almost 4-5 pick and roll dribble handoff thing he ran with Rudy there while KD was on him. I mean, Cat cooked that and looked like a wing doing it. It was the most... Cat is slowly starting to look more and more like a big wing in the way Nas looks like a big wing. Maybe big is an understatement. Gigantic wing, right?
Right.
And that's that role. That's the role. When you're on the floor with Rudy, they need you offensively at least to be a gigantic wing because that's going to lead to more spacing.
Right.
What Cat's doing a great job of defensively is he's being a big, often guarding the center defensively guarding the center there. Like that's the role. Be like a 4 or 5 true big defensively with a little bit of chasing duties, but offensively, I think Carl's role
Rudy
when he's out
chasing there as much or more than Cat is now.
Sure.
I mean, that's a thrilling development as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
You know, because Rudy, it used to be Rudy can't do that. Rudy won't do that. You know, and there was legitimate questions of whether Rudy could or would do that coming into the season. And he doesn't even, I mean, what is revealing to me is he doesn't want to concede it as much as he wants to do it. You know, he doesn't want to say, yeah, I'm out there. He wants to still say, I'm Rudy Gobert. I protect the rim, and that's what I do. Mm-hmm. But he's Rudy Gobert, and he's almost everywhere out to the 3-point line now at various times during a game. And that to me is an old dog learning a very new trick.
And you know who deserves as much credit as Rudy does for that is Cat.
Mm-hmm. Well,
because that does. The thing is, the Rudy didn't do that in Utah because they didn't have the option of having Karl guard the player that Rudy would typically guard. What makes the Wolves defense secret sauce, whatever, is Cat guarding a big, a good
and
one.
Jaden being able to fill, and Ant being up on people. I mean,
now what unlocks it is being able to put Rudy in the position to lurk or to play off of Draymond or to guard the non-shooter.
Okay,
that's the weapon. Yes, the Ant and Jaden and Nikhil or whoever like need to pursue. They need to be up in the ball. They need to do all those things. But you can't put Rudy in the lurk without Cat. You can't. If it was if Jaden was the 4, if you whatever, like you couldn't do that. You know, if
the only other person I could see it happening with is Slow-Mo, actually, not Nas, but I think Slow-Mo could stay with a big.
And what was the first breadcrumb of this being a potentially great thing for the Wolves? It was last season when at Target Center, Cat was out. They played the Denver Nuggets and they beat him. And Kyle Anderson started and he guarded Nikola Jokic. And Rudy Gobert lurked off of Aaron Gordon. It's the thing. This is the thing. It's what makes this team special defensively. The pursuit has been great. The on-ball stuff, that's good. But those things are required to be a top 10 defense. You need to have that. To become a great one, you need to have a weapon. And they've turned Rudy into a weapon because Karl's been able to check, the primary guys. And Phoenix didn't present that matchup. That's part of the reason why I think they ran them. And it's a thing to note in our heads. Like, okay, yeah, they look like they can compete with Denver in the playoffs. Right. You know, you can open yourself up to that idea because we've seen it work a little bit. Even Boston, you're like, that.
Right.
They seem to contend with them.
Phoenix, to be honest with you, I mean, if they play Eubanks instead of Nurkic, and I don't think it was a coincidence that Nurkic looked totally out of sorts, and he has all year, but this was a matchup tailor-made. I mean, Eubanks is a notorious Wolves killer,
It's good.
I mean, wasn't that fun, though, when Nurkic flushed one on Cat and went down and did the same.
Eubanks.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It was Eubanks flushed one on Cat and immediately went down and tried to do the same thing on Eubanks.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That was great. It was like I'm sticking up for my boy.
Right. I guess just to put a pin in it, like Cat, cool to see the offense having come around. The one thing that you and I have been talking about, though, like pretty much throughout the season, is his Cat has had a defensive standard, not as a superb defender, but one that allows them to unlock something in their defense, Rudy's abilities to a higher level. And Cat deserves credit, in my opinion, for both sides of the ball right now.
And I think even more so, or maybe not more so, because I think it bothers me probably more than it bothers his teammates. How would I know one way or the other? But I do think that the self-awareness and the engagement and doing the right things and being a good teammate and being a guy in the locker room that is not acting strangely, all of those things I think are signs of Cat maturing in ways that, let's face it, in year 9, year 8, whatever it is, you wondered if these things would really come to fruition. And it's yet another thing. I mean, we are wondering when Ant would take the leap. We're wondering if Rudy could, extend beyond his defensive habits. We're wondering, about all these various things, how, Mike Conley's age would, so far, so many things pointing upward on questions, revolving around the Wolves. That's why they're 8-3.
It's why we're holding this tone even after kind of getting run off the floor and choosing to see the excuse rather than
the legitimate mulligan, in my opinion.
That's well put. All right, Britt. Let's move over to what you talked about in the end of your column, which was Jaden McDaniels. Among NBA players who have logged at least 200 minutes thus far this season, Jaden McDaniels fouls more frequently than any of them. He's averaging 5.4 personal fouls per 36 minutes played.
His career average is 4.2. And
Yeah.
I probably 4.1 before the season started. It's a significant difference. And he was a fouler before. He's
second in the league in fouls last season, total fouls.
Yeah. And he's fouling more now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've gone into the reasons for it in the past, and they're legitimate reasons. I don't want to say that
to be clear, I want to more like get and I want to talk about why he's fouling, but like it really shifts how the game goes. Like I always note to myself when he isn't, and the rotations don't get broken up. It's more the things that they're aiming, like the players they're aiming to have on the floor together. It is dysregulating. I mean, we can make excuses for why they're happening and how they're happening and all that. I'm more trying to wrap my head around how dysregulating it is. I know to some degree, as any good player getting in foul trouble dysregulates your plan. It's just the dysregulations are happening very frequently because the fouling is up the season.
And the injury to begin the season. I mean, I don't think it's any coincidence that the team's defense, while good, really clicked into place after the fourth game. I mean, during the fourth game, the first 3 games, no Jaden, everything kind of locked into it. What we see about this defense.
He played in the third game in Atlanta.
Oh, he did play in Atlanta?
Yeah. He was on Trae Young. But when the
but
winning streak started.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So anyway, it's another point is penalty. I mean, if you're in the penalty early, there are teams that the Wolves haven't played that many teams that exploit that yet. Mm-hmm. But like the Sixers, when they come to town, I will tell you, any fouls that Jaden gets on Tobias Harris or Tyrese Maxey is
lead
just
points for Embiid.
That means Embiid is going to live at the line, because Embiid's going to get his share.
Right.
So it's extremely important that Jaden doesn't foul as much against the Sixers and against a handful of other teams that do this well.
It's also, I mean, I just want to note they're so fortunate to have Kyle Anderson to be able to plug in those situations. Yeah, and Nikhil too, for sure. I just like the perfect example of playing without Jaden is the second Warriors game, right? They played 46 and a half minutes without him. And, Kyle Anderson did a lot in that game, but he got that offensive rebound that, when we were talking about those 3 big plays of the game, that was the first of the 3 big plays. It started it. It was the first winning play that won the game. And Kyle's been Kyle, which is actually a high bar, and they're fortunate, and they need that. They need that with Jaden McDaniels, and it's just another, as we start thinking about the bigger picture of Kyle's on an expiring contract, unrestricted free agent this summer. It's not just that Kyle Anderson is tied into the fabric of who and what this team is and regulates this team, much like Mike Conley does. He's also the bridge of Jaden's foul trouble, which is a near nightly issue with this team. So I say that to mean,
and the backup point guard, as long as J-Mac is out. I mean, seriously. I mean, you would think that Finch might have been saying that facetiously before we actually saw what happened. Mm-hmm. But the more that Na and Shake Milton can't play the point that reliably, I mean, they can bring the ball up and get it over the half court line. But if you're talking about
I mean, what is happening when Mike Conley checks out of the game? The majority of the time is you see the point of attack guard picking up full court now. That is in the scout. It's in the scout now. When Conley's out, we're pressuring the ball full court. Because the other teams don't believe the Wolves have a backup point guard.
Yeah. And good point. And so once it's past the half court line, then you just give it a slow-mo and he does his thing. He gets down to the foul line and then basically pulls out his easy chair and figures out what to do, you know? Don't you think of him slow-mo? I always imagine him when he's around the foul line of just basically sitting down and just saying, all right, now what do we got here? You know, let's get out our spreadsheets and figure out where everybody is. Oh, okay. Yeah. I think it belongs right over there, you know?
Totally. Him and Rudy ran a below the 3-point arc pick and roll in Golden State, which you so rarely see anymore in the NBA. But like, I was kind of like, I don't know, maybe like that could be a thing, you know, when Kyle's at the nail, elbow extended, whatever, like, sure, there you go. It's jam packed in there, but I kind of trust the two of those guys to work it out.
Right. And he also, when somebody plays that slow, it really does allow, I mean, you played more basketball than I have, but even in my very limited time, the pace, you match your brain with the pace of the way you're playing, you know, sure. So that if things are going furiously, your mind is going furiously, and sometimes you're going to miss things. Whereas if people have a chance to kind of get into a more natural human thought flow during a game, they're going to recognize things that they don't otherwise recognize about the pace of play. Right. You know, I think it's just, I think that when slow-mo is on the court, other people also play more intelligently. And some of that is they recognize that if they do things off the ball, he will reward them. But also, I think it has to do with the fact that they're watching the floor, they're seeing the way opponents are reacting, and they're thinking more strategically in general. And
right.
And that's I just think that if Ann has the ball inside the 3-point arc and Slomo has the ball inside the 3-point arc, you're operating very, very differently as a teammate, you know?
It's like what's the line with Luka and Jokic is like, nobody can speed them up, right? And that's what makes them so special.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because they are both that way, right? And that's the way. That's the European game, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like no one can speed Kyle Anderson up, because there are the bad Kyle Anderson games where he does, and it's like the turnovers and stuff like that. But that's the delta between him and Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic, right?
Exactly.
But most people can't speed Kyle Anderson up, which makes him a very bankable offensive asset, you know, night to night, that he's going to get to his, because he knows how to do that. He's able to duplicate that 8 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times. Luka and Jokic are doing it 10 out of 10 times. You know, he's up there like that, and it's why it's regulating. But it's also why Kyle Anderson's as consistent as anyone on this team outside of, you know, Mike Conley.
Right. And to bring it full circle, when he's at his best, what Jaden McDaniels does is speed people up.
Yeah, I like that.
And so, you know, you begin to need to make something happen so that you don't get caught, you know, and it's important. I wish there was a way to know whether he can separate his temper from his competitiveness. You know, right now it seems fairly intractable. I don't see him being able to do that yet, and that's an important question.
Yeah.
If he can't regulate his emotions, I mean, the one that did it for me was back-to-back shoving of
Jamal
Murray. You know, the second one especially was like, fuck you. You know, I've had it, you know. I don't care how many technicals I get on this, you know. It was just like, it was a heedless, dumb foul. and he had been baited past the point of no return. And that's people notice. And as I wrote, it wasn't his fault. He didn't know it was cement behind that tarp. But if you punch a wall and cost yourself the playoffs, people are going to know even more than they did before. This guy's got a temper that can really hurt him.
Yeah. I'm not smart enough to know how to analyze the emotional regulation.
Right, exactly.
And don't know Jaden well enough to, to be able to.
Psychology being what it is, you do have to basically, the proof is in the results.
Yes. Yes. And that's why I'm more thinking about it. We've talked about this just sitting at games. Like I'm thinking about more like technical things with Jaden that protect him from foul trouble. I'm seeing, and I should probably just go through and like watch the fouls if I can go back and find them. Like I think last season, so many more of the fouls were blocking fouls as people were charging into him. This season, it seems to me so many more are shot contests and like getting up to really contest shots. It's like he made that
screens. I think his desire to slip screens from certain angles while the smart ball handler is cutting off those angles so that they collide. I've seen a lot of those kind of fouls.
Right. It's like we call that the rear view contest, right? When you're chasing around the top side.
Right. But it could be that it's a side to side thing. It's a side contest, whereas he's basically trying to go to the left of the screener while the person goes right. And instead the guy goes left into him. So they collide,
It's a double-edged sword though, because I think what we know for a fact, as Finch has told us, is he's told all the guards to up their pursuit.
Yes.
Like their pursuit of everything.
Absolutely.
And Jaden has.
Right.
But because Jaden has a 7 whatever wingspan, his pursuit gets his hand closer to the ball handler's shot, right?
Right.
And so that's why, like, when he's contesting shots and not fouling, those guys are not making those shots.
Right.
Like they're just really, really contested shots. They're difficult. But at the same time, he's now just closer into the ball, into the shot. He's getting more foul calls in that way. And that's what it's making this like, well, we need you to be the point of the spear defensively and be the one who is emblematic of this pursuit mentality that we have defensively. But the way you're doing it is so good that it's also generating fouls. It's almost like you want Jaden to get a little bit more hand in the face versus hand on the ball.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Point. Yeah. Because of his length. What Rudy does, the reason Rudy doesn't foul is because Rudy doesn't try Rudy is into shot deterrence on his contests. If he's going to block a shot, very, very rarely is he slipping anything. He's going right at somebody on a closeout. And he has an awareness of shot clock, who it is that's shooting, what kind of release point they have.
Right.
And to be fair, he's not getting the guys who make a living ringing up points. I mean, Jaden is getting the smartest and the most prolific scorers in the game. It's almost by definition, if you're scoring a lot, you really know how to score. And knowing how to score is using the judo techniques of people who go against them, taking somebody's momentum and using it against them. And he's got a lot of momentum, and he's also got a temper. So if you fool him a couple of times, or if you do what Clay did off to the side, which probably a lot of us wouldn't have thought about too much if it hadn't erupted into a brawl, I'm sure that people will do ticky-tack stuff to Jaden off ball that have nothing to do with offense, defense at that particular time, because you want to get under his skin.
I'm really curious because the reason we're dwelling on this is because it's we believe it's meaningful, right? Because the foul
he's
trouble.
He's the best defender on the team.
Yes. So So again, my mind is going to like, what are counter solutions here? Like, what are things we can do? And the one I've been asking myself more recently over the last week is like, what is the opportunity cost of taking him off the point of attack more often and putting him off ball? Because I mean, I think he could develop into like a Covington-esque off ball
That's a great
guy, but they put him at the point of attack all the time. And
which we did not think was going to happen as much. Remember after what Na did in the play-in and then the playoffs, we thought that
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
It'd be like a 50-50 kind of deal. But Na has a certain type. And some of it is not, I mean, SGA, obviously he knows his game, but Murray, he did a good job on. I think it's like crafty, but not ultra quick guys are guys that Na can handle.
And not also, ultra strong. Like
exactly,
I think Booker, for that example, last night would more put, go be able.
I don't know who's the ideal guy. You know who handled Booker better than anybody I've seen is Alvarado during that weird first round series they had, and that's just because he was a maniac.
Right.
I mean, he was like Pat Bev in his prime, kind of. You know, and he got under Booker's skin. And very, very few people have done that to Booker.
I guess the theory is if you can pull Jaden off ball more, then he fouls less.
Right.
That's the theory, right? So to get to that, you need somebody to be able to take the ball more often. And we're saying Nikhil can do that.
And Slomo can do that. Yeah, but on the other end of things.
Situationally, it doesn't feel like or Finch doesn't seem to have enough faith in that to really lean into either of those enough to pull Jaden off. And I think what the ultimate skeleton key here is can Ant do it? Can Ant more often take the point of attack? And maybe that's more of a playoffs question. It's just why I would have loved to see them play Phoenix where they looked like they'd slept.
Right. Because Booker on Ant, Ant that didn't have a cold, wasn't fighting, a lot of things. It would be an interesting matchup because Ant does like that kind of challenge. Booker's deceptively strong, and also people don't realize what somebody with 27-foot range can do versus somebody with 24-foot range can do. Because if you got to also worry about that 3 feet where they can stick a three in your face, that limits what you can do from 24 to 15 feet. Because you got to make sure that you're guarding a guy way out. That's why Curry obviously is so effective. But Booker has that range now, where he can bomb from deep, and that creates 3 more feet of work for a defender.
He might be I saw you were tweeting about this last night, saying Booker has reached the elite levels of outside shooter in the league, along with Dame Lillard and Steph Curry or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I agree is getting up there, but he might be the best 3-level scorer when we talk about that. The ability to be a serious weapon from deep, serious weapon from mid-range, and the ability to get all the way to the.
And what's interesting is Durant is a competitor there, obviously. And Bradley Beal for that.
Beal, I was going to say, man, that was peak Beal. That was Beal's game too.
Yeah. Which is one of the reasons I don't like Phoenix, to be honest with you, is because their skills are so redundant, even though they're broad-based. What happens if Booker and Durant are both hot from outside or both hot from mid-range or whatever?
We'll see.
Everybody would love to have those problems.
I'm much more open-minded.
Problems. Yeah, I'm not. I'm 11 games in, man, and Oklahoma City has still got a better record than the Suns. So,
this might be a dumb topic or question, but I'm just curious what you've thought of the in-season tournament.
I hate it. I knew I was going to hate it, and therefore I do. I'm closed-minded about it because I don't like to be sold something that is so obviously a commercial, consumer, ginned up bunch of bullshit. What does it mean? Tell me what what am I supposed to think of this thing? And I mean, I got into it online one day and enjoyed the arguments, quite frankly, because I thought they were so easy to rebut. But, it's like for fun. Oh, okay. Let's have fun playing basketball. That never happens. I haven't watched the game for 50 years because it's not fun. I mean, obviously there's a bunch of fun in basketball. Pro basketball is the greatest sport in the world. If you're not already having fun watching the current product, maybe you ought to go watch football again or go watch baseball or something, because there's nothing wrong with NBA basketball. It's fun. And so there's that argument. The argument of that it's meaningful, can be meaningful for some teams. What's meaningful is winning games throughout the season. You already have 55 to 60% of the teams going to the playoffs. What, you want to include the 35 to 40% who don't have a chance, and have like a mid-season, or actually not even mid-season, a quarter of the way through the season? You want to have some catnip for the Detroit Pistons of the world in case they can get a meaningless cup, given to them in December in Vegas of all places, which to me is just fucking perfect. It's in Vegas, it's just, obviously I'm not a fan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I went in with a lot of it. I mean, I hardly talked about it at all. I'm not going to be like, oh, excessive game preview here because it's an in-season tournament game. What I struggle with the money grab part of it or whatever, and trying to force something home. My question was always, what is the incentive to drive the players to play harder? What is going to get them to do more in these times? Because that's your whole pitch here, right? Is these games have an elevated level of importance. I was very skeptical of that idea, because I'm just thinking about, I'm like, all right, Karl Anthony Towns about to make $50 million next season. He's already made 200 some million in his career. 500K prize, but only one of the 30 teams get it. How much are they going to all work for it? You know what I underrated? The importance of it to the rest of the guys. And I don't think I'm like blowing up Shake Milton's spot by this, but I saw him talking to Troy Brown about it after the last game, and they were looking at the standings, they were looking at the point differentials and caring about it, which again, it lit the light bulb off in my head. And I'm like, what? I didn't think any of the players, and maybe that was just stupid on my part, naive. Then I go, it makes sense that Shake Milton cares about it. It makes sense that the whole Wolves bench cares about it. Let's just go through the bench. So obviously Kyle Anderson been in the league for a long time. He's made $51 million in his career in 9 years. So 500K, not a huge swing there. You know how much money Naz Reid's made in his career in 4 seasons? $6 million.
12 million? Yeah,
6.
Okay.
He's made $6 million. So 500K, that's 10% earnings boost of 4 years just from this thing. I mean, Nickeil Alexander-Walker's made $13 million in 5 years. 500K is meaningful to him. And Shake Milton has made $7 million in 5 years. Not to mention, you go further down the list to Luka Garza's been in the league for a couple years. He's made two-way contracts. He's made like 100.
Those endorsement deals are going to come through.
That might be true. Do you get what I'm saying though?
I do. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. And what is fascinating about that is, if that were true, and I think it is true, why not have this thing like 3/4 of the way through the season when all your starters are needing a blow, and you get to put in the Shake Miltons of the world because they have the extra incentive at that point.
And that's where the money grab part comes to it. They're literally trying to put intrigue and get the games watched at the beginning of the season when they've historically had their worst ratings. I mean, it's the thing people talk about all the time is people don't start watching the NBA till Christmas, right? That's why they did this. They tried to get people to watch the NBA before Christmas. And I haven't seen anything on numbers or whatever it might be, but I've spent so little time talking about it because I
Right.
was like, whatever.
Yeah. No,
There's
no, no,
more
no.
interesting
But
things.
again, and quite frankly, I haven't, aside from my, blanket closed-minded condemnation of the whole thing, I haven't really given a lot of thought to it.
Yeah.
But I do think that your point about it, one being financially enticing for players who don't have a lot of money in the bank, relatively, and the idea that you can't maximize that because it's not the right time for the NBA to cash in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it gets us back to, I'm not a big believer in, wholesale changes to things that'll wreck stats and change comparisons and everything. But I think I'm with the herd that believes that if you had a 60 game NBA season and spaced it out and maybe started at Thanksgiving instead of Christmas or something,
Sure.
Then and those games would be more, attended. And even if they're not, I mean, let's say revenue goes down, you still have a product that produces well-rested teams. The games mean more because
the problem is if the answer starts with, well, revenue will go down, but it's never going to happen. So they would need to reconfigure something in a way that revenue, like for games to go down, for revenue to make up revenue in another way. And I don't know. I mean, it's just it's the way it works business wise here, I think.
Yeah. It's too bad that everything always has to grow, I mean, I know that's the capitalist model, and I'm not going to get into politics on that level, but I do think that everybody doesn't always need to be paid more, I mean, they've got a great existence. Stasis economically is not death economically. I know that's heresy to, the capitalist way of thinking, but I got to tell you, I'm a pauper relative to most people in life, and I'm very happy.
Yeah. Anything else you want to hit on from this past week or that we missed?
I mean, what do you think of the league? Have you watched any games?
I mean, I was just, it's tough when being on the road
to
having some of that.
I'll tell you, I liked the Kings when Fox.
I watched that game. I watched that Kings Cavs, or one of the two Kings Cavs games. Yeah,
De'Aaron Fox is a very valuable player. Is all I can say. I mean, and I love the Pacers. I actually think that Sabonis Halliburton deal. Halliburton playing with Miles Turner instead of having Miles Turner instead of Sabonis as the guy you chose. Miles Turner was really good. I saw that Pacers Sixers game where they lost the first one because Maxey got 50, and then they came back and Halliburton got like 58 points and like 25 assists with one or no turnovers in those two games. It was just ridiculous numbers.
Well, I think they're the number one offense, right?
Yeah, and they're very bad on defense sometimes, partly because they're making that mental exchange. All right, you want to score, we'll score more.
Right.
Kind of like the Kings model, ironically enough, of last year. And Rick Carlisle is a good coach, and he's a crank, and he's got his foibles, but he's a really good coach. Right. And I think Dallas probably, I don't know. Dallas is doing really well. I was going to say Dallas misses Rick Carlisle, but apparently they don't because they're playing well too.
No, they have. It's it's we're in one of those. I said this to John when we recorded the other day, though. Like last year at this time of year, the teams with the best records did end up, for the most part, like outside of Utah, end up being the teams with the best records at the end of the season. And I always, I guess kind of in all sports, don't get too caught into the standings
Right.
At this time of year. But I think I think much like we're giving the Wolves credit and passes when they lose like they did
Right.
last night, it's because we believe that they're one of the better teams in the league because they're consistently winning and they're showing their X, Y, and Z. And I think I think teams like that, like we should give a team like Dallas that's off to a hot start credit to, or maybe, you know, things that we're seeing early in Sacramento. Like those were, I think, two teams that everyone was like, you know, maybe we don't want to put them up in the firmament of the Western Conference. I think that is a cool thing with the NBA right now. There was that stretch of the Cleveland Golden State year after year in the championship thing where a lot of the regular season was just feeling negligible and you kind of knew where the end game was getting. I don't know with the NBA right now. Like you said at one point earlier, like, I guess the odds on favorites to go to the finals are like Denver and Boston. But like, I already know we're going to change one way or the other. We're going to change our mind on that at some point this season.
Well, Denver's bench is weird, and the Sixers are a lot better than I thought they would be. And then you've got the, you know,
as are the Wolves. Like the Wolves are doing the Sixers podcast is saying that about the Wolves, or they should be as well, or Dallas is, you know, like
and super teams have a middling record right now, and you don't know, given the thing about super teams is they're full of super egos, because otherwise you if you're a superstar, you have learned, if only for your own protection, to have a super ego, you know. And so what are Booker, Beal, and Durant going to do if everybody continues to get dinged up, or they haven't been able to figure it out because they can't get on the court together and they're redundant to begin with? Or what are Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi going to do? Paul George and Kawhi have expiring contracts, and Harden is always a step away from obscurity. I mean, there's a real drama to those. And on the other hand, you've got, like,
we don't know the answer. Like,
no, we don't.
I think we've gotten, like, I think with just those teams that we're bringing up right there, we've got to the presumption of failure because we're pointing to one thing. Like Boston, every time I talk to anybody about Boston, it's like, yeah, well, but Porzingis is going to get hurt. And that's just like an assumption. And then, you know, the bottom breaks from there. And it's like, well, not for sure. And then with the Clippers too, it's like, yeah, the Clippers, we've done this over and over again, and they're never all on the floor there. The personalities never work. Well, like, we don't know. It's never like it. And you know, Phoenix too. I'm not going to just assume it's Brooklyn 2.0. I'm not.
Right. And when I saw the Clippers with Kawhi on all his burners in that early playoff games, they looked like a team that could wipe the floor. You know, they could just run the whole thing. And so
it's an interesting thought process, even if we're looking at it through the lens of the Wolves, right? Because now I think most of us are seeing the glass half full, and thus the lens points towards these type of teams. It's like, how do they stack up with Dallas?
Right. I still think it's a step. I think people who have listened and read me in the last 2 weeks know I'm really bullish on this team. But I also think their ceiling is not even close to a ring. I think that there's steps to take that
normally how it goes.
Yeah, they are going, you know, I think
there is so much more time though to take those steps in the season. And that's why I think it's important that we're at this place right now. And yeah, I'm not calling the Wolves a
no. But I think that a playoffs around victory is very much in play at the moment, you know?
Yeah. It's not even how I'm going to project out the team or think about what success or failure is.
You don't want to get ahead of yourself at the same time. You don't want to discount anything.
And you know, people are probably getting sick of me saying this. It's like, I'm seeing a good team, and I'm seeing, as Finch said after the last game, a lot of meat on the bone. Right. I don't know if they can eat all the meat. I don't know. But that's what I'm going to track, because if they get all the meat off the bone, it is a finals contender. that a Western like getting to the finals contender. I really do. There's just a lot of meat on the bone still, and a lot of that ties to consistency of the double big. Look, what is Ant doing in growth? They're going to need to win a back-to-back at some point this season and not look like that. And right now, I mean, I know that was a brutal back-to-back, but I don't know when their next back-to-back is. But you know what I'm going to be saying before that? I think the Wolves are going to get killed. Because so there's just these things about them, the defensive rebounding. There's some things in the broader context of being a really good team that I'm like, there's a lot more to get here. And that's why I love that there's 71 games left.
Right.
There's so much time to get those things. And I know they have a coach that isn't going to downshift into coast at any point of the season. I know Finch is going to be obsessed about getting those things. So at
he does not believe in babying his team. And sometimes, I mean, he's got idiosyncrasies. One is he calls timeouts at very specific times that he wants. And he is not, he does not base his timeouts on opponent runs ever, And another one is if somebody wants to make an excuse about the schedule, he has zero patience for it. I mean, he just doesn't want to hear about it. Everybody's got their own deal in terms of schedules. And, nobody pointed to Atlanta's back-to-back as they totally ambushed the Wolves in the second half of Game 3. And, there have been games where opponents have had a rugged game before they played the Wolves. And so, it's everybody gets their share of adversity. And John Schumann, by the way, I'll put a plug in for him. His weekly power rankings almost always factor in rest advantages and rest disadvantages. And it's a great way to think because it's a factor. It's as much of a factor as whether or not your seventh man is playing well or not,
For sure.
And so, it's again, I love the fact that this began with what do you think of the play-in tournament? And now we're talking about things that really matter.
Yeah.
Right, the in-season tournament. Yeah.
Right. I will say though too, I was really low in the play-in tournament when they put it in. I'm like, what? Why do we need more than 16 teams? I now think the play-in tournament.
I like the play-in tournament.
Exactly. What were we saying about
it? But actually, I wasn't that down on it, to be honest with you. Because that is something where you had meaningful games.
Yeah.
What those games mean was somebody would go on to the playoffs. What these games mean is somebody gets a big fat trophy. I mean, in December. Sure. I don't care. I don't care.
And that's maybe
if there's a trophy when I walk into Target Center that says we won the games in December, I don't care. But if you win a play-in game and you get to be in a series, even though you're not in the top 8, I like that idea.
Yeah, because you're a playoff. It's more meaningful. That's the ultimate.
I like meaningful basketball.
Yeah, no, I'm with that too. More meaningful basketball coming up. I got Saturday against the Pelicans in New Orleans. And
what a weird team that is. Holy shit.
Yeah. I was watching a bunch of them at the beginning of the season just on accident. And I'm like, this is useless because it was so many injuries and so much Matt Ryan. And so I'll be watching some New Orleans this afternoon at some point to see some Zion Pelicans, which will be an interesting, different look for this Wolves team. I wouldn't. Obviously, Zion didn't play the first time the Wolves played them, so I wouldn't assume this is going to be a Pelicans team that just rolls over to them in the way that they did the first time. The Wolves could lose that game, and then the Knicks. You're back home, but the Knicks on Monday. I mean that team is playing at a high level,
and as Jim Pete always points out, and I didn't realize this. I mean, he played for a long time, so he knows. And it is true. Your first game back from a long road trip is kind of like a road game.
Yep.
Because you don't have that settling in yet.
No, that's true. And so that's the Knicks, which is the lesser. Then you settle in against the Knicks, and then you got Philly on. Actually, let me plug. We do have 2 more tickets to give away to the Sixers game on Wednesday. for Patreon subscribers. Send us a message. Let us know you're still in town, would want to go to that game. All you got to do is just send a message on there, and we will pick somebody from that mix. That's patreon.com/Dane Moore NBA. That's what's coming up, Britt.
All righty.
Pels on Saturday. I'll see you.
Pels, Knicks, Sixers,
Kings.
Yeah. It's a meaty platter.
It is over the holiday, and I'll miss the game. Right. Actually, let me say that here too. I'll probably say this tomorrow as well, but I leave town for Thanksgiving. This is just for listeners. You know this. So there will not be podcasts next week on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, because I'm going to be on the road, not recording.
And I should put in my own little 2 cents on this. My next column is going to be a mailbag. Mm-hmm. So if you ask questions too early, to be honest with you, they're probably not going to be as relevant. But I'm going to write it during next week, Thanksgiving week. It's a way for me to bridge Thanksgiving holiday from InPost and put it up Wednesday. So around Monday, maybe late Monday, early Tuesday, if you've been watching
where
games,
should they send them?
Just hit my Twitter feed with them, I think my Twitter feed is probably the best place at Britt Robson.
You normally put out like a tweet asking for them.
I do, and I will again. But if somebody wants to start thinking about it, you and
I love those, and so probably even we're going to record on Tuesday.
Really I like mailbags, yeah.
So even if the questions don't maybe make the
ones I don't hit the column, we can answer those too. If we don't have them, and it isn't like we had nothing to talk about today. Practically, we always go an hour and a half.
I know. Speaking of, with nothing more to talk about, I'll be back with Kyle Tighe tomorrow. We'll take a second recap of the week. I'm actually excited to talk to Kyle. It's like with some of you guys, it's a lot of stuff happens over the course of the week. I think Kyle.
And also Kyle Tighe may present himself as a fan and is obviously a diehard fan. He knows the game, and I think that sometimes his self-effacement and his humor and everything kind of obscure the fact that he knows a lot about basketball and is worth listening to beyond the yucks and the fandom.
Absolutely. I mean, he's plugged in. He's been doing this for a long time, and that's so much of the job too, is caring.
Right.
I think. And
exactly. Enjoying, if you don't have joy for what you're doing, it sounds like a lousy podcast to me.
No. So we're going to do that. And also talk a little bit about some ownership stuff, as that is about a month or so away before that starts creeping into the Wolves topics du jour. So that'll be with Kyle tomorrow. Until then, he's Britt. Read his column will be up at MinPost on Friday. He'll tweet that out at Britt Robson. Until then, he's Britt. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.